We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Under Labor, Australians are living with higher prices and increasing interest rates. While the Treasurer blames the private sector, Australia's leading economists say the problem is government spending. Stephen Smith, Deloitte Access Economics partner, said government spending was, quote, historically high and, quote, a genuine driver of inflation. We all know the Treasurer won't. So will the Prime Minister accept responsibility for yesterday's rate rise? Yes or no?
I give the call to the order. Members on my right. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Well, this is what the RBA Governor said yesterday when she was asked very directly about government spending. She said, what's happened in the last 6 months or so, private demand has turned out to be much stronger than we have been forecasting. That's what the RBA Governor had to say very clearly.
Order. The member for Fisher will cease interjecting.
We know that Australians are still doing it tough, and we know that cost of living pressures are real. But that's why we have measures to actually address cost of living pressures, to take pressure off family budgets in every way that we can. And we'll keep focusing on easing cost of living pressures, on making medicines cheaper, which we did on the 1st of January, investing in more bulk billing and urgent care clinics, which we are doing, cutting student debt by 20%, opposed by those opposite, paid prac and $10,000 incentives for people to do apprenticeships in construction or in energy, and of course free TAFE that has now had more than 700,000 people participate in it. That's why we support real wage rises. That's why we supported a tax cut last year, and why on July 1 there'll be another tax cut, and next year there'll be another one after that. I note before—
Order. The member for Goldstein. They'll make it 2 from 2. Prime Minister in continuation.
I note we had a debate about a cost of living measure before question time today. Those opposite can't even agree on cheaper beer. Remarkably.
Order. The Manager of Opposition Business will take his point of order, as he's entitled to do so.
Just on relevance, the question wasn't about the debate earlier today. It's about interest rates.
I just invite— the Prime Minister was asked about higher prices and increasing interest rates. He was talking about the price of an individual commodity, but I'll just invite him to return to the question.
I was, Mr Speaker. I was asked about cost of living and the pressure that people are under, and I'm talking about the measures which we are taking. And one of them we're trying to legislate through the Parliament. It passed the House of Representatives earlier today, but the Liberals split from the Nationals. But more than that, 5 of the Liberals went and voted with the Nationals against the government's position. So,
order. The member for Gippsland.
I take the interjection from one of the Nats talking about the bubble. They can't stop talking about themselves, Mr Speaker, each and every day. Sky News doesn't have 30 seconds where there's not one of them sitting in their studio.
Order. The member— well, just dealing with the member for Gippsland first of all. Far too much interjection from the member for Gippsland. That yelling will not continue. No. The member for Gippsland's now warned, not having a repeat of yesterday with that continual barrage of noise. It's not acceptable and it's not respectful to the chamber. Now the Manager of Opposition Business.
The Prime Minister is defying— you directed him to his remarks to the question. He is not doing that. He's defying—
resume your seat. Well, if the member for Gippsland and other members would stop interjecting so loudly, perhaps the Prime Minister wouldn't be provoked. So we can easily deal with this. Order. Well, you know, if you don't want him to not answer a question, or don't interject, because he's taking interjections. It's pretty simple. Order. The House is going to come to order. The member for Gippsland will now is warned, and if he says one more word, it's completely unacceptable. Prime Minister in continuation.
Mr Speaker, I know the Manager of Opposition Business would be somewhat sensitive, given he's now down to 23 members who will follow a decision of the Shadow Cabinet. 23 out of 150.
Give the call to the honourable member for Ford.
My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring the future of the defence estate, and what will this mean for defence capability?
The call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
I thank the member for his question. Today, the Albanese government has announced the biggest review of Australia's defence estate in our country's history. As we face the most significant strategic circumstances since the end of the Second World War, the Defence Strategic Review made clear that we need to be investing more in our bases across our north and our west, and we are doing that. There's just one example. We now have exquisite berthing capability at HMAS Coonawarra in Darwin, which will see and saw last year an aircraft carrier come alongside for the first time. We're engaged in an $8 billion redevelopment of HMAS Sterling in Rockingham in preparation for the Submarine Rotation Force West. But as we focus on these investments, it's become clear that we need to look at the entirety of our defence estate, because defence is one of the biggest landholders in the country, and it is clear that much of that land is now beyond its useful life for defence. And so we commissioned Jan Mason and Jim Miller, both experts in the field, to engage in an audit of the defence estate, and I want to thank them for their work. It was thorough and exhaustive, but in so many ways it was also damning. To quote their report, defence is holding more property than it needs and is carrying the burden of past indecision to reorientate the estate towards more contemporary and future needs. Attempts to consolidate and rationalise property holdings in the past have been stymied by a lack of political and organisational will to overcome challenges. It is clear that maintaining the status quo is not an option. Well, today we are garnering that political will to make the difficult decisions. And I really want to thank the Assistant Minister for Defence, Peter Khalil, and the former Assistant Minister for Defence, Matt Thistlethwaite, who have led the government's efforts in this area. Today we are announcing that we are agreeing in principle to all 20 recommendations of the defence estate, and that includes the divestiture in full of 64 properties, the divestiture in part of another 3, and every cent of that will be reinvested in defence capability. But most importantly, we will stop wasting money on properties that we don't need. As just one example, in the last 4 years we've spent $4 million securing Spectacle Island in Sydney Harbour, when we haven't had a member of the Defence Force on that site since 2023. These reforms will now focus the defence estate to be the foundation that the Defence Force needs in order for it to do its job to defend Australia.
The call to the member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Manager of Government Business. 2 weeks ago, this parliament passed legislation to respond to the Bondi terror attack. The crossbench was required to vote on legislation mere hours after receiving it. That process disrespected the 1 in 3 Australians who voted for a strong crossbench, and it degrades the democracy that we fought so hard to nurture. What steps will the government take to ensure that lawmaking processes following future crises will not degrade democracy in this way?
Give a call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Bradfield for the question. I thank all members of the House for the cooperation in those sittings that we had not so long ago. Nothing degrades a democracy more than a terrorist attack. It's as simple as that. And as soon as the horrific anti-Semitic terror attack had happened in Bondi, a number of us assembled in Canberra the Prime Minister made sure that the National Security Committee was meeting daily. Within the first week, the Prime Minister had stood up in the courtyard to announce that there would be a legislative response with respect to guns and with respect to hate laws. And from that moment, public servants worked every day, including daily briefings to myself and to the Attorney-General through the Christmas New Year period. And the moment we had legislation ready, two things happened. The Prime Minister stood up in the courtyard and announced that Parliament would be recalled, and that day the legislation appeared as an exposure draft to make sure that people had an opportunity to get across the legislation as best they could, and various negotiations started, but also a parliamentary inquiry started immediately as well. I would love to have a situation where all legislation could be dealt with in a staged manner like we do with most legislation in this House, where we don't commence debate in the week that it's introduced. That's what we normally do. But if anyone wanted any piece of evidence about why the timely nature of that going through quickly mattered, it's to think about what happened on the Sunday, after the legislation had been released, but the Sunday before this Parliament returned, and the National Socialist Network, the neo-Nazis of Australia, disbanded. It wasn't because we were saying we were going to take our time, it's because they knew it was going to go through that week. That's what happened.
Order.
They made sure that they had disbanded. There are many organisations engaged in anti-Semitism. There are many organisations engaged in a number of forms of bigotry that my intelligence and law enforcement agencies that I'm responsible for as Minister for Home Affairs have to deal with. And the priority that we take, without apology, is if something has to be done quickly to keep people safe, then that's how we do it.
The call to the honourable member for Hasluck.
Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government backing our Defence Forces by making sure that they have access to the investment, assets and infrastructure that they need to keep Australians safe? And what approaches has the government rejected?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Hasluck for both the service and for the question. The government will always support the men and women who proudly wear our uniform to keep Australians safe, investing in our capability and investing in our relationships. And on Friday I will be in Jakarta seeing that through, signing a landmark security agreement with Indonesia. But we also need to support Defence Forces at home, making sure that every single dollar that's spent makes a difference to defending our nation, building on our record defence funding and focusing our capacity where it's needed. Now, we commissioned an independent review into our defence estate to investigate how to do just that. And it's clear that there are significant opportunities to do things a better way. Defence owns a significant estate that is simply not being used at all, or in some cases is just underused. Big buildings on big plots of land are sitting half empty 7 days a week, and Defence has a full-time job maintaining them. From a personnel and also an assets perspective, that simply doesn't make sense, and it's not an efficient use of that land either. Many barracks and buildings sit on land that's gazetted for use well before Federation, and they serve a purpose more fitting for that time, frankly, than they are for today. So we are taking action to maximise our defence capability. The Commonwealth will sell 64 defence estate sites across the nation and invest all proceeds back into defence, supporting our Defence Force personnel, making sure that our defence estate is fit for purpose, but also creating opportunities for urban development, for green spaces and housing in our cities. It is about making sure the men and women who keep us safe can do just that. This is a win-win-win. It is a win for the nation's defence. It is a win for opportunities when it comes to housing, but it's also a win for ensuring that economic efficiency comes through, that we don't have estates just sitting there costing money to be maintained that are serving no purpose in either being used by our Defence Force personnel or in defending our nation. This is a sensible way forward, and I thank the Defence Minister and the Assistant Minister Khalil for the extraordinary amount of work that has gone into this. This is a sensible reform going forward.
We'll move to the next question. I'm pleased to advise the House that President of the gallery today is Meg Brown, Member for Franklin and Shadow Minister in the Tasmanian House of Assembly, and Councillor John Doerr as a guest of the Member for Bullwinkle, the former Shire President of Muttering. We give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And my question goes to the Treasurer. Shane Oliver, AMP Chief Economist, said, and I quote, "The best thing that Australian governments can do to help bring down inflation would be to cut government spending." When will the Treasurer finally admit he must control his spending to prevent the 14th interest rate rise under Labor?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Once again, leaving out the interest rates started going up on their watch and the 3 interest rate cuts last year. But more broadly, Mr Speaker.
Order. The Deputy Leader has asked his question.
Yeah. So, Mr Speaker, in terms of the points made by Shane Oliver, as I said yesterday in this place and on other occasions as well, that is a view that is not unanimously shared amongst economists. The AMP economists said government spending has peaked and the growth in government spending is going to add less to inflation. Commonwealth Bank economists, the public sector's contribution to growth has eased significantly. Westpac economists, public sector demand growth is slowing and indeed was negative over the first half of 2025. Now, if his question is, will the government be looking to make more savings in its 5th budget in May, the answer to that is yes. And the fact is that we've made savings in all of our budgets and budget updates. That's why we've found $114 billion in savings, including $20 billion in savings in the mid-year budget update less than 2 months ago. And to give the Shadow Treasurer and Shadow Assistant Treasurer a sense of the magnitude of that, it took the previous government 7 budget updates to find anything like $20 billion in savings. So I won't be taking lectures from those opposite when it comes to responsible economic management. Now, this government has helped engineer the biggest nominal improvement in the budget in the history of this country, a $233 billion improvement in the budget. We've paid down $176 billion in Liberal debt, which saves us $60 billion in interest costs. We've delivered 2 surpluses. They promised a surplus every year and went none for 9. So we won't be taking lectures from them, Mr Speaker. Now, I wanted to finish on this important point that was missed yesterday, Mr Speaker, in the back and forth on this question. Now, by the Shadow Treasurer's logic, every extra dollar in government spending puts pressure on inflation. Those opposite took to the election bigger deficits this year and next year, and so the onus is on the Shadow Treasurer to inform the House, if this is his logic about government spending and pressure on inflation, he should tell the House how much higher inflation would be as a consequence of the member for Fairfax and the member for Hume taking to the last election a bigger deficit this year and a bigger deficit next year as well. As always, they've set a little trap for themselves, Mr Speaker, on this question. Now, we know responsible economic management is paramount. We've found savings to date. There'll be more in the May budget, and that's consistent with the approach we've taken to managing the budget and the economy in the most responsible way.
Give the call to the honourable member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How has the Albanese Labor government approached the task of budget repair? How does this compare with other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and to the member for Banks for the big and thoughtful contribution he's already making in his first term in this place. And Mr Speaker, as I was saying, the mid-year update that we handed down in December detailed $20 billion in savings, and it banked every cent of upward revisions to revenue. And what made it the most responsible mid-year update on record is that it was the only one ever to have a better bottom line every year of the forward estimates, less debt every year of the forward estimates, and net policy decisions that improve the budget bottom line. Now, this is entirely consistent with the responsible approach that we've taken since we came to office. We've delivered that biggest nominal turnaround in the budget ever, $233 billion improvement. We found those $114 billion in savings. We've got the gross debt down this year $176 billion lower than when we came to office, and that means we're avoiding that $60 billion in interest costs. But where the progress is most obvious is when you compare our record on the budget to our predecessors. Now, they promised a surplus in their first year, and every year they never delivered one. We've already delivered 2 surpluses, and we got their deficits down. They had real spending growth averaging 4.1%, Mr Speaker. We've got it down to 1.7%. They had spending at almost a third of the economy. We've got it down closer to a quarter. They spent the majority of upward revisions to revenue. We have saved most of them. They had debt peaking at 45% of our economy. We've got that down to 37%. They doubled the debt even before the pandemic, and we've been able to get some of it down. They went to the election promising to jack up income taxes on every taxpayer. We'll cut taxes this year and next year as well. And I know that the Shadow Treasurer has been talking about fiscal rules, Mr Speaker. The Liberal Party's fiscal rules weren't worth the paper that they were printed on. They promised the surpluses, they went none from 9. They didn't limit their spending or bank revenue upgrades like we have. They failed every test that they set for themselves. The highest spending government was Scott Morrison's government. The highest taxing government was John Howard's government, Mr Speaker. And they took to the election a policy for higher income taxes, higher electricity bills, bigger deficits and more debt, Mr Speaker, and that's why nobody takes them seriously on the economy anymore. They might change their leader, Mr Speaker, but they can't change their record. We will not be taking lectures from them. We have delivered the surpluses, the spending restraint and the savings that our predecessors could not. We know that there's more work to do on the budget, and that's our focus as they focus on who sits where over there.
Give a call to the National Party Whip.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. The Reserve Bank decision to increase interest rates will place more cost of living pressure on Australian families. When the Reserve Bank cut rates in August last year, the Treasurer put out a long media statement taking credit for the decision. Treasurer, why does the government take credit when interest rates go down, but no one takes any responsibility when the rates go up? Why don't you apologise to the Australian people?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you to the honourable member for her question. As I said yesterday and again today, I take responsibility for all aspects of my job, including my part in the fight against inflation. And I dispute the characterisation of comments last year. I think I've been saying for the last couple of years that budgets aren't the primary determinant of prices in our economy. I've been saying that really for some time now, and that's because it's true. I know that we've got a job to do to roll out cost of living help in the most responsible way that we can, to make the budget even more sustainable. I take responsibility for that as well, Mr Speaker. Now, when it comes to the points that those opposite have been making about yesterday's decision by the Reserve Bank to increase interest rates, I think it's really important to recognise that the points that I have been making yesterday and today are in lockstep with the points that were made by the Reserve Bank Governor. And this is what the Reserve Bank Governor said in the press release announcing the decision. Growth in private demand has strengthened substantially more than expected. Private demand is growing more quickly than expected. In the Statement on Monetary Policy, they said private demand was much stronger than expected. The near-term upward revision is driven by private demand, Mr Speaker. This is just the economic facts that the Reserve Bank Governor and I have been pointing out. And in the Reserve Bank Governor's press conference, she said private demand has turned out to be much stronger than we had been forecasting. But perhaps most importantly, when it comes to refuting some of the rubbish that has been peddled by those opposite, Mr Speaker, this is in the Statement of Monetary Policy issued yesterday by the Independent Reserve Bank, and I'm quoting here. The contribution of public demand to year-ended GDP has continued to ease in recent quarters. And that's because what's been happening in our economy is an important transition between over the course of the last year or so, where the public sector, measured by public final demand growth, has been retreating. Last year it was less than a third of what it was the year before, and that slack has been taken up by the private sector, which is a good thing so long as the economy can accommodate it. And that's why the work that we're doing on productivity and lifting the speed limit of the economy is such important work, Mr Speaker. And so we're seeing that transition in our economy. We've seen it over the course of the last year or so. And so the points that I've been making, the points that the RBA Governor have been making. Now, we know that there's more work to do on inflation, on productivity, against the backdrop of global economic uncertainty, and that's the government's focus.
The call to the honourable member for Macarthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health, Aged Care, Disability and the NDIS. How is the Albanese Labor government securing the future of the NDIS and delivering more funding and support to help Australian kids and their families to thrive?
The call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member who knows just how much the NDIS is a proud legacy of our Labor Party. It's a world-leading program of support for people with significant and permanent, usually lifelong, disabilities. But when we came to government, Mr Speaker, we found a scheme that was running off the rails at a time when the scheme should already have been pretty much fully matured. It was growing at a whopping 22% per year, Mr Speaker. And our government immediately started the hard work to get that growth rate down to a more sustainable level. We set a target of 8% growth this year in 2026, and the mid-year budget update that the Treasurer published only several weeks ago reported that we are on track to meet that target, Mr Speaker. But I've also said that an 8% growth target for a scheme with a relatively stable population base is still not sustainable. And on Friday, state premiers and chief ministers agreed with the Prime Minister and our government to work to get that growth rate down even further to 5 to 6% or lower, Mr Speaker. Of course, we will do that work in close partnership with the disability community itself, but I make the point that sustainable growth in this scheme is not just important for the budget, although it is also a critical way to ensure the long-term future of this critical scheme, absolutely critical scheme. The other concern that we encountered, Mr Speaker, though, was the huge number of young children enrolled onto the NDIS, particularly young boys. 1 in 6 junior primary school boys now are on the NDIS, and in some parts of the country it's as high as 1 in 4. This is simply not what the scheme was set up to do, and it's not the best way to support young children with low to moderate needs, Mr Speaker. And that's why I was also delighted on Friday that state premiers also agreed to our plan to introduce the Thriving Kids program. I want to thank the member for Macarthur, the member for Kooyong, a number of other members in this place for their really quick but comprehensive inquiry into this program that they delivered very recently. I also want to thank the Thriving Kids Advisory Group that I co-chaired with Professor Frank Oberclade for their work to set up this model of a program. It's a program that will be rolled out over the coming couple of years. It will help children with support needs be identified as early as possible, and importantly, Mr Speaker, it won't need a formal diagnosis, which we know can take ages and ages teenagers to receive and cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Instead, support will be easy and quick to access, and it will be available where young people and their parents live, learn and play, Mr Speaker. In short, giving every child in this country the best opportunity to thrive.
Call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Under Labor, families have seen their mortgage repayments rise, their savings stretched and their cost of living worsen 13 times. This did not happen by accident. HSBC Chief Economist Paul Bloxham says government spending has, quote, contributed to the upside surprise to inflation. After 13 rate hikes, will the Prime Minister finally accept responsibility, end his reckless spending and stop making life harder for Australian families?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm asked about government spending. We're the first government in almost 2 decades to deliver back-to-back budget surpluses. We've returned over 70% of all tax receipt upgrades to the bottom line, compared with our predecessors who returned around about 40%. Debt in 2024-25 was $188 billion lower than what was forecast in their budget in 2022, handed down by Josh Frydenberg. This has saved the nation around $60 billion in interest costs. Under this government, average real annual spending growth is 1.7% over the 7 years to 2028-29. This is around half of the 30-year average of 3.2%, and it's less than half of what it was under the former coalition government of 4.1%. Now, the ratings agencies have all reaffirmed Australia's AAA credit rating. S&P said last September sound fiscal metrics support our AAA long-term sovereign credit rating on Australia. Australia's fiscal performance is sound. Fitch said Fitch affirms Australia at AAA, outlook stable. The Parliamentary Budget Office found that at the election time in 2025, less than a year ago, that our platform would improve the budget over the medium term, and they concluded that those opposite had a platform that equalled higher taxes, bigger deficits and more debt. Just a fact. All up, the coalition would have increased deficits by $135 billion over the coming decade, added $147 billion to government debt, and that is after they were going to slash essential services, get rid of more than 40,000 public servants, and not just not have the income taxes that we are going to reduce. They were going to legislate to increase income taxes for every single taxpayer. That is what they had to say. That is what they're the facts, Mr Speaker, and they don't like it, but they are the facts as we go forward, and we're happy to have a debate with them about the facts, because those opposite are just focused on their disagreeing with each other.
Concluded. The House comes to order. We shall hear from the member for Gorton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. As students across the country head back to school, what is the Albanese Labor government doing to ensure Australian kids get the best start possible? What is so important to deliver rather than divide on school education?
The call to the Minister for Education.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend the glorious member for Gorton for her question. Mr Speaker, school is back now across the country, and that means a lot of relieved mums and dads and a few nervous kids, not as nervous as a few people over there. There's a lot of kids. I'll tell you a story. There's a lot of kids changing schools, changing classes, changing teachers, changing seats. There's a bit of that going on over there as well. There's kids in classrooms right now that are learning how to read and are learning how to count. There's a bit of that going on over there as well. And no doubt there's a few kids that are yet to get back to school. They might be still on a European holiday. They'll get back late and no doubt expect to get elected school captain. But, Mr Speaker, this is a big year for school education. Last year we signed agreements with every state and every territory to fix the funding of our public schools. That funding starts to roll out this year and the reform that's tied to it. And a big part of that is reading. The reading wars are over. We know what works. A big part of that is phonics. A big part of that is explicit teaching. And a big part of that is identifying children early who are falling behind and giving them extra support. And part of that is a phonics check for kids when they're 6, when they're in year 1. And that rolls out right across the country in every state and every territory this year. Now, to give you an idea how important this is, South Australia has been doing this now for almost a decade. When they started doing it in 2018, 43% of 6-year-olds met the expected standard. When they did that test last year, it was 66% of 6-year-olds that met that standard. That's why it's important. That's why we're rolling this out now in every state and every territory, and that's why now we're going to do the same thing in maths. A Year 1 numeracy check that starts to roll out this year. Mr Speaker, can I also use this opportunity to give a quick shout-out to our teachers, people who do the most important jobs in the world. And this year there's going to be big changes to teacher training to better prepare students to teach children to read and write and count and manage classroom behaviour. And some good news, I can advise the House that this year the number of applications from students to start a teaching degree at university is up 6.5%, and university offers are up 6.3%. So that is all good news. More funding for our schools, more teachers for our schools, and more focus on the basics to make sure more of our children get a great start in life.
Before I call the honourable member for Flynn, I'm pleased to advise the House that Councillor Yolanda Kenyai from the City of Palmerston is a guest of the member for Solomon, who's also joined us in the gallery today. Give the call to the honourable member for Flynn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. The Prime Minister promised that Labor Energy Plan would reduce household electricity bills by $275 per year by 2025. Minister, why has this not happened, and will you apologise?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change. Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting immediately. The Treasurer, until you cease interjecting, we won't hear the answer. Minister for Climate Change and Energy has the call.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question, and I note that in his electorate 1,128 Flynn households have introduced a cheaper home battery under our policy and have reduced their energy bill by 90% or more, and in many cases have reduced their bill to nothing and now get a rebate. And that's a common story across rural and regional Australia, Mr Speaker, which I'm sure all honourable members welcome, whether they're rural and regional members from the Labor Party, the National Party, One Nation or aren't sure. They all welcome this great news. Now, Mr Speaker, the fact of the matter is that in Queensland, wholesale prices of electricity in May 2022 were $347 a megawatt-hour. They are now $58 a megawatt-hour. Some of the biggest reductions we saw in the last quarter were in Queensland, and that's a good thing.
Order.
It's a direct result of the increase in renewables across our grid. So we know there's much more work to do to ensure that every Australian benefits from the increase in renewables and solar. That's why we're doing things like Solar Sharer, which those opposite oppose. I mean, one thing that unites them is that they're opposed to free electricity in the middle of the day, apparently, Mr Speaker. They're the sorts of policies that this government will keep implementing and that those opposites simply don't understand.
Order. Members on my left. The Leader of the Nationals is getting close to not being here in the chamber. The call to the member for Cornwall.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government's record investments in bulk billing helping to strengthen Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. The member for Cornwall is such a terrific advocate for Medicare in his community and in this place, because he knows that Medicare is Australia's most important program, Mr. Speaker, and he also knows that the beating heart of Medicare is bulk billing. The promise that every Australian should feel that they can go to the GP whenever they need to, rather than when they feel they can afford to. The promise that all they should need to take to the GP is that little green and gold Medicare card, Mr. Speaker. But we know that when we came to government 3 and a bit years ago, bulk billing was in freefall. That was the description given to it by the College of GPs, and we also know that the reason why it was in freefall was no mystery at all. It was because the Liberal Party government had frozen the Medicare rebate and frozen the income of doctors for year after year after year, most of those years as a result of a budget decision overseen by the Leader of the Opposition, of course, when she was the Health Minister, Mr. Speaker. And because of that freezing of their income, GP leaders had started to advise their members to walk away from bulk billing. Well, when we came to government, Mr. Speaker, we were utterly determined to turn that around. In our first full budget delivered by the Treasurer in 2023, we tripled the incentive that GPs get paid for bulk billing pensioners, concession card holders and kids. It was a request from the College of GPs, and when we delivered on it, they called it a game changer, Mr. Speaker. And bulk billing rates for those Australians are now comfortably back up over 90%, Mr. Speaker. We also delivered the 3 biggest general increases to the Medicare rebate in 30 years. The biggest, the second biggest and the third biggest since Paul Keating was Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. But also, only 3 months ago, for the first time ever, we delivered bulk billing support to every single Australian, not just those with a concession card, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy to report that already that is making a huge difference out in our community. The member for Cornwall and I visited the Craigieburn Medical and Dental Centre late last year, Mr. Speaker, and before the 1st of November, that centre charged gap fees. But after our incentives were announced, the GPs sat down, they crunched the numbers and they realised that taking up that offer was better for the practice, it was better for GPs individually and obviously it was better for patients. And today that practice bulk bills all of their patients all of the time, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, before the 1st of November, only about half of the GP practices in Cornwall bulk billed all of their patients. Today that figure is 90%, Mr. Speaker, 90%, which is great for GPs, great for household budgets and great for the health of that community, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we work so hard to strengthen Medicare.
Give the call to the Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question goes to the Treasurer. Scores of economists, including those referenced already in question time today from Deloitte to AMP to HSBC, are all saying that the Treasurer's reckless spending is contributing to inflation, despite the Treasurer desperately attempting to deny all responsibility. So does the Treasurer truly expect Australians to believe that all of these economists are wrong, but he is right?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Again, by his logic, the bigger deficits that they've taken to the last election for this year and next year would make the inflation challenge in our economy worse, not better, by his own logic. And you can't take to an election a policy to spend much more and to have bigger deficits and more debt and then make the argument that the Shadow Treasurer is making. He's got to choose one argument or the other, Mr. Speaker. Now, when it comes to the views of economists, as I said on a number of occasions now, there are a range of views about this. AMP, government spending has peaked. The growth in government spending is going to add less to inflation. The Commonwealth Bank, the public sector's contribution to growth has eased significantly. Westpac, public sector demand growth is slowing and indeed was negative over the first half of 2025. Even this morning, Mr Speaker, Access Economics made the point that public spending is not the driver of the uptick in inflation that we saw towards the end of last year and represented in last week's inflation numbers. Now, Mr Speaker, if the Shadow Treasurer doesn't want to take the word of those economists, then I refer him again to the comments of the Reserve Bank Governor yesterday in the media release, in the Statement on Monetary Policy, in the press conference itself. And the Governor made the point, and I'm quoting, "Growth in private demand has strengthened substantially more than expected." Quoting again, "Private demand is growing more quickly than expected." In the Statement on Monetary Policy, quoting, "Private demand was much stronger than expected." In the Statement on Monetary Policy, "The near-term upward revision is driven by private demand." In the press conference, "Private demand has turned out to be much stronger than we have been forecasting." And so this is the reality that the Governor of the Reserve Bank and I have been pointing to. And in the Statement on Monetary Policy, once again, the contribution of public demand to year-ended GDP growth has continued to ease in recent quarters, Mr Speaker. And so those opposite continue to ignore the very clear statements made by the Independent Reserve Bank when explaining the decision that they took yesterday. And we understand that as a government we need to continue to manage the budget responsibly. We need to roll out this cost of living help in the best way that we can, and there's more work to do on the budget in May. That's obviously the case. Now, Mr Speaker, when we talk about cost of living help, we should remember that just this morning the opposition leader said, and I'm quoting, "All the relief that the government has provided to struggling Australians, that's not the answer." So they don't support the cost of living relief that's rolling out. We do, and we're doing it while we're making the budget more responsible as well.
Concluded. Call to the honourable member for Leichhardt.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering the infrastructure and transport regional Queensland needs? What approaches has the government rejected?
The call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for Leichhardt for the question. It was an absolute pleasure to stand with him, with the member for Braddon and Minister McBain this morning to announce up to $5 million to support regional and remote airports that supported REX. Many local councils and their regional airports were left shortchanged when REX went into administration, but they continue to support regional travellers across the country, ensuring that REX could continue to fly in. That funding will go some way to covering the shortfall for regional airports across country Australia, including in Cairns, and I encourage local councils and members to encourage their local councils to apply for that funding. As the member for Leichhardt knows well, though, we are not just investing in his electorate's airports, but we're also making record investments in Queensland's, in particular in Queensland's longest highway, the Bruce Highway. It was just over a year ago now that I joined the Prime Minister in Gympie to announce an additional $7.2 billion into the Bruce Highway to improve the highway north of Gympie up to Cairns. That takes our government's total investment in the Bruce up to $17 billion. I'm really pleased to be able to see the progress that is happening. So imagine my surprise, and I can see him interjecting, when I read comments from the member for Dawson, who at the time was an occupant of the opposition benches, is now over there, that our investment being jointly delivered with the LNP government and my good friend Brent Mickelberg, we work well together, that this money was just a stunt, with him saying, let's be honest, this $7.2 billion was made purely for politics. So seeing as the member for Dawson thinks investing in Queensland is just a stunt, I thought I'd tell you about some of the delivery.
The member for
what we've finished so far: strengthening the road service at Tamala intersection, Spider Creek Road, Goodbye Creek Road and Handcamp Road, completing road repairs and strengthening between Ingham and Innisvale, between Ayr and Townsville, widening and delivering safety upgrades for Bootaloo Road. And now we've started pre-construction and design work to improve safety between Mackay and Proserpine, from Ayr through to Townsville, right across the Dawson electorate. Around Mackay, we've kicked off road strengthening works at the southern entry and continuing down to Proserpine South. Procurement is underway so that we can soon start road surface strengthening at the northern and southern entrances of Sarina, and we're widening the road surface between Eldridge Road and Poppy Road, including the installation of a new wide centre lane. 38 projects already started and underway. So while the former coalition is getting their steps up, travelling around, plotting between their offices, we're getting on with the job of building the infrastructure that Queensland needs, including a significant investment in the Bruce Highway.
Call to the honourable member for Curtin.
My question is for the Prime Minister. Since you came to office in 2022, parliamentary committees have prepared 78 reports and hundreds of recommendations on policy areas ranging from domestic violence to plastic pollution to gambling harm. Your government has only responded to 4 of these within the required 6-month window. 57 reports haven't received any response at all. Why is the government consistently failing to respond to important committee recommendations? Why set up these inquiries if they're not going to go anywhere?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Curtin for her question and for her engagement in the parliamentary processes. The member for Curtin brings due diligence to her local representation, but also for participating in the broader questions that come before this parliament. My government is characterised by orderly decision-making, by taking the views not just of the parliament but outside the parliament into account, as well as we develop policies one by one, also ticking off on the commitments that we took to the 2022 election firstly, and then the 2025 election. We engage in a cohesive way as well with departments, making sure that after a committee hands down a report, we give it proper consideration through our cabinet processes. We make sure as well that we have proper funding involved and go through our ERC process before any expenditure process is agreed to.
Order. The member for Patten is now warned.
That is the orderly process that we...
Order. The Leader of the Opposition has had a pretty good go this question time. Just the continual interjections and is just too much. So just please assist the House by not interjecting.
That is the orderly process that we do. If you go back and have a look at the previous government's records, they used to just not bother to respond at all to committee reports. My government takes these issues seriously, which is why we engage, including, it must be said, with the crossbench regularly at the regular meetings we have. It could be that there are a number of regular crossbench meetings we have to have, even more so into the future, and I look forward to all of them participating.
The House comes to order. We shall hear from the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry. How is a united Albanese Labor government delivering defence capability to keep Australians safe? What approaches has the government rejected?
We call to the Minister for Defence Industry and the Minister for Pacific Island Affairs.
I thank the member for Boothby from the great defence state of South Australia for her question. Speaker, the Albanese government is united and working hard to deliver the capabilities our Defence Force needs to keep Australians safe. And importantly, we're accelerating delivery at the same time as creating Aussie jobs. We've increased Navy strike range tenfold, and we're more than doubling the size of the warship fleet. Our first new warship will be delivered 5 years ahead of the Liberals' planned first new frigate, and will deliver 4 new warships in the time the Liberal government wants to deliver 1. We're also delivering the autonomous Ghost Shark submarine to safeguard our maritime approach. And they're rolling off production lines right now from a factory in Sydney. We're acquiring counter-drone capabilities in record time,
and our world-leading Ghost Bat is the first military aircraft designed and made in Australia in over 50 years. Now, Speaker, we're making missiles right now in South Australia, and we'll open another missile factory next year. By contrast, under the last Liberal government, not a single missile was built. All they produced was 2 media releases. And you can't defend a country with media releases. Now, Speaker, I'm also asked about what we've rejected. We've rejected the chaos and division that we've seen from the Liberals and Nationals. The Albanese government runs a proper, orderly cabinet process because our national security demands nothing less. And this means we can deliver. We're creating 10,000 shipbuilding jobs. By contrast, the Liberals closed 2 shipyards, slashing thousands of jobs. We're investing $10 billion in drones and counter-drones. The Liberals cancelled the nation's only armed drone project. We're undertaking the biggest reform to defence in 50 years, while pet goldfish lasted longer than Liberal defence ministers. And, Speaker, we're building factories while they're building leadership contenders. We're rolling out missiles and drones while they're rolling leaders. We're opening production lines while they're opening old wounds. Speaker, we're focused on boosting our missile numbers, our ship numbers and our drone numbers. The only numbers the Shadow Defence Minister is focused on is boosting his own numbers in their party room. The Albanese Labor government is delivering on our commitments to keep our nation safe, create jobs and build Australia's future. The Liberals and Nationals are a shambles. They're completely divided. We're focused on national security. All they care about is their own job security.
Order. When the House comes to order, the member for Herbert interjected 9 times during that one answer, and as a result of him being on a warning, he will now leave the chamber for the remainder of question time. There's consequences for actions. I don't know why people can't understand that concept. When the member for Wannon finishes, we'll continue with question time. Member for Kennedy now has the call.
Treasurer, young mothers today must have a paying job, be a wife, cook, family bookkeeper, kids chauffeur, house cleaner, laundry lady, church on Sunday. Not surprisingly, when 20 Australians die, only 15 will be born. Advance Australia Fair is Hughenden irrigation scheme. 15 Hughendens create 3,000 farms, 10,000 owner-operator businesses, 100,000 homes with backyards. Hughenden has had $170 million allocated now for 8 years. Queensland dithers. Will you create a water authority and call tenders? Treasurer, you won't get a portrait, you'll get a statue.
Order. Just remind all members regarding time limits and questions. Order. When the House comes to order, the Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thanks to the member for Kennedy for his question. I wanted to say that one of the first things I did this year was travel with the Prime Minister and Minister McBain to make sure that we spent time. Yeah, he has been to Hughenden twice as Prime Minister. He's very committed to the northwest of Queensland. And you can see that in the fact that Minister McBain, the Prime Minister and I went and spent time with the good people and industries of Cloncurry. Our thoughts obviously are with the farmers and miners from that part of Australia in the aftermath of this horrific flooding. Now, the question was about a number of things, Mr Speaker, but primarily I think about water infrastructure. And since May 2022, the Albanese government has invested $1.2 billion in more than 130 projects through the National Water Grid Fund, improving access to water, driving growth and supporting long-term environmental health. And we know, Mr Speaker,
Kennedy's asked his question.
We know, Mr Speaker, as the member for Kennedy pointed out in his question, 400 clicks up the road from Cloncurry in a beautiful place called Hewenden. This government has made a $170 million commitment to support the Hewenden irrigation scheme in the member's electorate. And he is right to point out that project is waiting on a Queensland Government review, which is currently underway, the Gulf Water Plan, I think it's called, which will provide the water necessary to support the scheme. It has been a process which has been underway for some time, and we're waiting for that process to conclude. Now,
order. No, the member for Kennedy. Member for Kennedy. Just listen to my advice. You just can't get up and say what you'd like. You've done that during the question. If you wish to raise a point of order on relevance, you can. I'll take that. It was a point of order on relevance, but you need to say the point of order on relevance. So the Treasurer was asked a question about the funding, and he's talking about the $170 million. I'm listening carefully to make sure he's been directly relevant to what you asked him. The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and also mentioning the frustrations that the member for Kennedy has about the wait on the Queensland Government's Gulf Water Plan. I understand that that's the next thing that needs to be completed in order for the project to go ahead. Obviously, beyond that, in Queensland we've got other big water commitments, $600 million near Bundy, really important food bowl as well. But we do know, Mr Speaker, as a government we can always do more on this front. We take the member for Kennedy's suggestions very seriously. We have decided to review the Water Act, the Murray-Darling Basin Plan and the National Water Initiative to make sure it's delivering on what we need it to. I acknowledge Minister Watt and before him Minister Plibersek for the work that they do on that. Our objective here is to maximise the enormous economic potential of North West Queensland. That is a passion that the member for Kennedy has, the Prime Minister has, the Treasurer. This government shares that passion with the member for Kennedy, and a big part of that, an important part of that, is building more water infrastructure, not necessarily more statues.
Order. Members on my left, when the House comes to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Spence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to build more houses and help more Australians into home ownership? Why is a focus on delivery, not division, so important?
Good question. Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I'm absolutely thrilled to get this question from the member for Spence because, of course, on Saturday the Prime Minister and I were in the member for Spence's beautiful electorate in South Australia as we announced a landmark deal with the South Australian Government under our 100,000 homes policy. Speaker, 2026 is going to be an absolutely massive year for housing, and our big focus is delivery, delivery, delivery. Speaker, we have got a $45 billion agenda here which will make transformative change to housing opportunities in our country. Speaker, we're building more homes, we're getting renters a better deal and we're getting more Australians into home ownership. Now, Speaker, first homeowners are unashamedly right at the centre of the focus that we have. And during the election campaign, our Prime Minister announced that we're going to build 100,000 homes just for first-home buyers. Speaker, we've been able to make this fantastic deal with the South Australian Government. That deal will see us build 17,000 homes in South Australia. 7,000 of these homes will be reserved just for first-home buyers, Speaker. No competition from investors, from people who have had housing opportunities already, just for those people who are missing out. Now, Speaker, the work with the South Australian Government has been really straightforward and construction for one reason. We share a very simple belief with the Premier, Peter Malinauskas, and that is that we believe ordinary Australians should get the chance to own their own home, and under our government that is happening more often. Speaker, I'm asked about alternative approaches, and there's actually quite a few that we've seen, and we're getting a bit of backchat here from the Leader of the Opposition. We saw the work, so-called, that she did when she was sitting on the front benches behind me, where for 9 years in this country we had an opposition, a government that was so checked out of housing. For most of that time they didn't even have a housing minister, Speaker. Now our government is on the pathway to build 55,000 homes. Do you know how many homes they built while they were in office, Speaker. In 9 long years in this country, they built 373 homes for Australians, Speaker. No wonder things are so diabolical. So that was the do-nothing approach. Then we had the make-it-worse approach, where they brought to the last election a policy that would have seen the Australian government build fewer homes and make existing housing cost more. Like, what a stupid idea. Now, Speaker, we see the approach that they have at the moment. And the truth is, Speaker, that we have opposite us a set of opposition parties who are so divided, so dysfunctional, they do not have a single sensible thing to say about housing, one of the most important issues facing our country. Speaker, they are much too focused on coffees and gossip and psychodrama to focus on the Australian people. We have a different approach. Housing is a priority of our government, and we are delivering for the Australian people.
Put the call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question goes to the Treasurer. The RBA Governor explained yesterday's decision to raise interest rates, saying, and I quote, "We work with aggregate demand. We are seeing aggregate demand, public and private, push up the limits of growth." Note her referencing of public. Yet the Treasurer told the House yesterday government spending was, quote, "not a factor in the decision they took," and he peddled the same story today. Is the Treasurer suggesting the Governor was wrong?
Order. The Minister for Housing is warned. The manager of opposition business. I've just warned the Housing Minister. You'll go down that pathway too. We'll wait for the House to settle. The manager for opposition is now warned. If I'm telling you you're going to be warned, that's a definite time to stop talking. I don't know what you're pointing to, but just sit there and just order. Order. Treasurer now has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The point that the Reserve Bank Governor was making, which I suspect the Shadow Treasurer knows and is being dishonest about, is she said that when you look across the economy at aggregate demand and total demand, the thing that stands out is that private demand recovered more quickly than they were anticipating, which goes to the half a dozen or so quotes that I've been reading out throughout the course of question time today and yesterday as well. Of course, when you look across the economy at total demand or aggregate demand, whatever you want to call it, the thing that stands out—
No. Look, no.
You're really struggling now, mate.
I want to deal with this. The Treasurer is just going to take a pause for a moment, resume his seat. We're simply not going to have a question time where everyone just thinks it's a free-for-all and you can say whatever you like whenever you like. That is not how this chamber will work. I talk about respect a lot, and that sort of behaviour is just— we're moving on beyond that. So the Deputy Leader will leave the chamber under 94A. I'm simply not going to have that behaviour. It's the same when people are asking and answering questions. Show restraint, show respect. Treasurer will return to the question and be directly relevant.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm addressing directly the quote that the Shadow Treasurer put to me. I could read through once again the half a dozen different ways that the Reserve Bank Governor made the point yesterday, but perhaps the best way to put this argument to rest for the Shadow Treasurer's benefit is the Governor was asked this question yesterday in the press conference. And I'm quoting, "Ted O'Brien put forward today that government spending was partly to blame for rising inflation. What do you think of that? And has the RBA raised any concerns directly with the Treasurer about the government's level of spending over the past inflation cycle?" Now, she answered with a point about they based their forecasts on total demand, which is not contested. And then she said this, and I'm quoting again. This is the Reserve Bank Governor. "What's happened over the last 6 months or so is that private demand has turned out to be much stronger than we had been forecasting." Now, that's in response to a question very specifically about the comments that the Shadow Treasurer has been making over the course of the last couple of days. It really couldn't be clearer that what we've seen in the economy, this is not a political opinion, it's not even an economic opinion. The facts tell the story in the national accounts and in the inflation figures, that what we've seen is a private sector recovery faster than anticipated in the forecasts, and that shouldn't be a contested thing. Now, what is also not contested is that this government understands that we've got an inflation challenge in our economy. That's why, more than acknowledging that, we're acting on that. We're rolling out the cost of living help that the opposition leader said this morning she doesn't support, at the same time as we're getting the budget in much better nick, Mr Speaker. That's the government's economic strategy to deal with this inflation challenge that we have, Mr Speaker. Now, I can hear the opposition leader contesting that she said this morning that we think the answer is to help with the cost of living for people who are struggling, and that's not the answer. That's what the opposition leader said. That is what the opposition leader said this morning. We've got a different approach. We know what's causing this inflation challenge. We know that we've got a role in helping to address it, and that's our focus, even if it's not yours.
Yeah. Call to the honourable member for Solomon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering more well-paid, secure jobs for aged care workers in Australia, including those in the Northern Territory? And how will these plans help deliver more care to older Australians exactly where they need it?
The call to the Minister for Aged Care and the Minister for Seniors.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for the question and his tireless advocacy for older Territorians, for First Nations people and for working people in Darwin and beyond. Mr Speaker, this government, this Labor government, was re-elected to build on our strong record of delivery. And when it comes to properly supporting aged care workers, that's exactly what we're doing. Now, just last week, we took another major step forward in our delivery of a new residential aged care home in Palmerston, with the announcement of the preferred provider to build and operate this facility. This 120 to 150 bed project will create hundreds of jobs, expand aged care capacity in the Territory, take pressure off local hospitals and deliver culturally safe care for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders. And we're not wasting a minute getting on with delivering it. It's just one project in almost $1 billion that this government has invested through the Aged Care Capital Assistance Program since 2022 to deliver more aged care beds and create more well-paid jobs all across our great country. After a decade of neglect, this united Labor government is putting working people at the centre of everything that we do. In aged care, that starts with real wage increases. Hundreds of thousands of aged care workers, most of them women, are earning more because this government stepped up to support them. To be exact, the average registered nurse in aged care is now earning $28,000 more a year. That's $28 grand more than what they were receiving in the 9 miserable years under those opposite. That's food on the table, it's rent or the mortgage paid, and it's birthday presents for kids. This is what delivery looks like under a Labor government, a government that values workers and the amazing work that they do to care for the ones that we love. And it doesn't stop at wages. It's about investing in people's skills, training and long-term careers. Free TAFE, scholarship programs and now paid prac are getting people into a genuinely fulfilling line of work so that older Australians can enjoy the fruits of a secure, well-resourced workforce in aged care that doesn't miss a beat as our population ages. This is what delivery looks like. While those opposite worry about their own jobs, we're lifting wages for working Australians. Yeah. While they bicker, we're building skills. And while they focus on themselves, we're delivering the pay rises, skills and new aged care homes that Australians actually care about. This government backs workers. We back higher wages and we're delivering for every single Australian. Yeah.
Give the call to the honourable member for Dawson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Given the Prime Minister's broken promise that households would be $275 better off on their power bills by 2025, and with families now being smashed by higher electricity prices under this government, on what exact date will retail electricity prices actually fall? Or was the $275 promise never going to be delivered?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. The government's been very clear. Wholesale prices are one of the inputs to retail prices. One of the inputs. There are other impacts on retail prices as well, but they are also the element of final retail prices that government policies have the most influence over. And that's a good thing because we're seeing them fall by 44% just in the last quarter. And we saw wholesale prices in Queensland in May. We saw wholesale prices in Queensland in May 2022 of $347 a megawatt hour. You know what they are today?
We'll see some
$58 a megawatt hour. And what we're going to see, Mr Speaker, is increasingly that sort of impact if we keep the policy settings in place that sees more of the cheapest, most reliable form of energy penetrate our energy system. We will see it continue to flow through to wholesale prices and then retail prices. And we'll also see continued reforms like Solar Sharer, which will see 3 hours of free power to those Australians who choose to take it up as a right. That's a good thing. We think that's a good thing. We've also made other reforms to the default market offer to ensure that sneaky price rises are not legal and that customers are on the best possible deal. That's what good reform looks like. Those opposite gave Australia 10 years of denial and delay and dysfunction, and they're certainly keeping up, particularly the dysfunction side of it.
When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to promote the safety of women and children? And how is the government working towards ending gender-based violence in Australia?
Call to the Honourable the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. The government is working together to support women and children experiencing family, domestic and sexual violence and to hold perpetrators to account. Together with my colleague, the most excellent Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services, we launched public consultation this week on draft legislation that will crack down on convicted child sex abusers who are shielding their assets in superannuation to avoid paying court-ordered compensation to their victims. The Albanese government is putting perpetrators on notice with a clear message. Child sex predators must not be able to game the system. Victim survivors deserve a real, enforceable justice system, and that's precisely what we want to deliver. This reform is about restoring fairness, dignity and accountability, and has been well received by stakeholders. Andrew Carpenter from Super for Survivors said, "It's a win for victim survivors across the country, as it shows the web is closing on all sex offenders." This work builds on our government's family law reforms, which make the system simpler and safer for families and children. Our reforms also recognise superannuation as a central component of the property pool to be considered in cases of separation, and that family violence and financial abuse can severely limit women's capacity to accumulate super. Superannuation funds now hold trillions of dollars in assets, making fair property outcomes critical to the long-term safety and economic security of victim survivors. I acknowledge the exceptional efforts of my colleagues, the Minister for Social Services and the Assistant Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence, who are leading cross-government delivery of the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. This is backed by record funding of $4.7 billion to strengthen prevention, early intervention, crisis response and recovery. Mr Speaker, these reforms sit alongside the government's broader economic security agenda led by the Minister for Women, including reforms to the low-income superannuation tax offset, removing barriers like the activity test for childcare and improving access to secure housing. We're investing in frontline family and domestic violence services, expanding specialist supports for children and strengthening legal protections so victim survivors can navigate the justice system more safely and affordably. The Albanese government understands that supporting women and children requires more than words. It demands united action across government and a commitment to sustained reform.
Call to the member for Fadden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, Lee from Pacific Pines in my electorate wrote to me yesterday about Labor's latest interest rate hike. Lee told me, and I quote, "It will kill me. My stress levels are already out of control. I cannot remember the last time I had a holiday, and I just worked on my days off on the weekend to try and earn extra money." Prime Minister, can you guarantee struggling Australians like Lee that there won't be any more interest rate increases this year?
Good call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question, and I am always sympathetic and good to hear from constituents in whatever electorate. And I say to Lee that we understand as a government that many people are under financial pressure, which is why, for Lee, I hope that you inform him that you would have had you been on this side of the House, although you might have been in bits if you were over here, you would have had a higher deficit and more pressure on the budget than what have occurred, because you stood for election as part of a team that would have had higher deficits and also would have had
Infrastructure.
not only no tax cuts, you would have had tax increases. That was the platform in which you were elected. And I hope you were honest enough to say to Lee, you know, I'm sorry that you were going to get higher taxes if we were in government. But fortunately for Lee, particularly if he's a low or middle-income earner, like it sounds like he was, I hope you also said that during the last term of parliament, the coalition, as it was then before it broke into bits, was in a position where they wanted to oppose and roll back the tax cuts that we took from the top end to the low and middle-income end to make sure that we supported. The fact is, when it comes to the economy, we have an economy that is continuing to grow. Inflation is down compared with what we inherited. Wages are up. We had the lowest average unemployment rate of any government in the last 50 years, 1.2 million jobs created, 3 out of 5 full-time, 4 out of 5 in the private sector, the smallest gender pay gap on record, fewer days lost to industrial disputes, record numbers of small businesses, solid business investment, record investment in public hospitals, and we've rolled out cost of living support, which the leader of the Liberal Party this morning had to say that they didn't support again. Cost of living support as part of dealing with the pressures that are there on the economy. Now, we will continue to make sure that we provide cost of living relief for people like Lee, and those opposite, I assume, will continue to oppose with every bit of energy that they do oppose each other as well.
Call to the honourable member for Bonner.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering a cleaner, cheaper and more reliable energy system for Australia? What are the impacts of Labor's delivery on Australian households, and how does this compare with previous approaches?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question, and what a difference the member for Bonner has made in just the short period she's been here, Mr Speaker, and I'm happy to inform the House 219,750. That's how many cheaper home batteries have been installed since the 1st of July, around 1,000 more than this time yesterday, and that's the sort of embracing of cheaper, cleaner energy we are seeing right across Australia, and particularly, Mr Speaker, in rural and regional Australia. 42%. of the cheaper home batteries that have been installed have been in rural and regional areas. People in these areas know that what's good for the planet is good for their pocket. And new data out today from the Clean Energy Council shows how important this is for the grid in reducing prices, not just for those who have the battery, but for everyone. And interestingly, Mr Speaker, as many Australians have installed a cheaper home battery in the last 6 months of 2025 as all the entire 5 years previously. That shows good policy in action. And of course, this comes in terms of the broader context of the last quarter, renewable energy hitting record highs, and the AEMO connection scorecard showing a record 64 gigawatts of new supply in the pipeline.
Now the Minister will pause. The Minister will pause. I just put the member for O'Connor on a warning, and then you interjected straight away. Yeah, so that means you'll leave the chamber under 94A for consequences for actions. So if you get warned and you interject straight away, you're definitely going to leave the chamber. It's pretty straightforward. Minister for Climate Change, and we'll return to the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as I was saying, we saw a record 64 gigawatts of new energy supply in the pipeline, and just in the last quarter, 1.8 gigawatts of new generation reach the position where it's connected to the grid. Now, the honourable member asked me how this compares to previous approaches, and we know that under the last government we saw 4 gigawatts of dispatchable energy leave the grid and only 1 gigawatt come on. Now, compare that to all the new energy supply that's coming into place now, and that's a direct result of policy. And of course, one of the consistent features over the last term of office was that between 2018 and 2022, the Minister for Energy was the member for Hume. And we saw a tailor-made energy crisis in this country. We saw disaster after disaster when it comes to energy policy. The opposition has been saying a lot about government expenditure and how government expenditure is too high. The member for Hume announced a $1 billion investment in new energy. You know how many kilowatts it delivered to the Australian energy system? 0. Call me old-fashioned, but I reckon if you're spending $1 billion, you'd want to see at least a watt of energy. And when we came to office, my incoming government brief told me that Snowy Hydro was running about 2 years late, but the member for Hume had hidden that fact from the Australian people. And then we had the member for Hume's famous investment in coal-fired power, the Collinsville coal-fired power station, a feasibility study, $4 million that he announced, and then 2 days later invited the successful proponent to apply. And we did not only not see a coal-fired power station, we didn't even see a feasibility report. It's a tough week for the Leader of the Opposition, but if the member for Hume is as confident in leadership challenges as he was an Energy Minister, the Leader.
We'll hear from the honourable member for Clark.
The question is to the Minister for Defence. Minister, the rationalisation of the Defence estate was long overdue, and I am supportive in principle. However, media reporting today appears to be silent on the future of Anglesey Barracks in Hobart. So can you assure my community that the barracks will indeed remain a key part of the Defence estate and receive necessary funding for upgrades?
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence.
Well, I thank the member for his very good and considered question. And the question is noteworthy in one respect, being asked at 3:30 in question time as the first non-government question which has been asked on the Defence Estate Review, in as much as it highlights the dog over here who hasn't barked. I mean, we have the biggest reform to the Defence estate in our country's history, and we have not heard from the Shadow Minister.
Order. Everyone resume their seats. Everyone resume their seats. I'll deal with this. The Deputy Prime Minister, that was completely unacceptable to refer to someone in those terms. You withdraw that comment, apologise, and get back to the question.
I withdraw, Mr. Speaker.
And apologise.
And I apologise, Mr. Speaker. But let me say, Mr. Speaker, what has characterised the Shadow Minister in his time in the Shadow Defence portfolio has been his absolute determination to leave it. Because over the last 9 months, he wouldn't so much say the Shadow Minister has been in defence, rather he's been on the attack. and his target is sitting right there.
Order.
What we've had is
order. Members on my left. The Deputy Prime Minister wasn't asked about any of the subjects that he's talking about. If he refused, I want him to return to the member for Clarks. I don't want him to refer to shadow ministers or anyone else. He wasn't asked about that, and if he continues with that, he'll be sat down. The minister will return to the question.
Well, I do thank the member for his question, and the short answer is yes, Anglesey Barracks remains a critical part of the defence estate. It is right that in your home state, in the member's home state of Tasmania, there has been significant reform as part of the defence estate review. What that will see is a rationalisation of a number of the properties, defence properties within Tasmania, and that will, for example, see the opening of a tri-service cadet facility in Launceston. It will also see consolidation in the northwest of the state for a facility which will deal with both reserves and cadets. But that includes in Hobart an Anglesey Barracks where, again, there will be a consolidation of the defence footprint around the Hobart region in the Anglesey Barracks. And as a result of that, the government is committing to a $20.8 million increase in investment into the Anglesey Barracks to make sure that it is not only able to undertake the functions that it has up until now, which are very important, but that it is able to undertake those functions going forward as really the consolidated centre for Defence's footprint in Hobart.
Call to the Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. My question's to the Leader of the House, Speaker. Why was the sessional order changed yesterday, and will the House be required to adopt a new sessional order tomorrow?
The call to the Leader of the House. Order. Members on my left.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Yesterday, it's well understood why we needed to adopt a new sessional order, because for the first time in living memory, the crossbench became as big as the opposition. And as a result of that new sessional order, we've been having more crossbench questions as a result of that new sessional order. I note yesterday we had a question from the member for Clark where he predicted yesterday that the crossbench was likely to soon exceed the opposition with more defections. I don't know if he knew what was going to happen today, but it has turned out to be prophetic. What I would say, though, is careful what you wish for. You might not necessarily want the people who you're about to get. But today, of all things and of all the issues to decide your line in the sand is, we had another 5 members of the opposition decide to defy the shadow cabinet. Another 5. Now, the issue— I've had a look at the actual amendments they were voting for, and it was the member for Canning, the member for Barker, the member for Longman, the member for Gray and the member for Forrest.
Order.
All of them defying the shadow cabinet's position.
The member for Barker will cease rejecting.
If you want to know, the amendment that one of the amendments that they decided was a matter of principle was to have a statutory review of customs and excise laws. I really don't think that was the reason they decided. And if you want to know the reason, you might notice the member for Canning's been reading a book during the course of question time today. Some people with better eyesight than me have noticed a copy of The Art of War on his desk.
The Leader of the House will just pause. The member for Gellibrand is warned. I want to hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Well, unsurprisingly, the Manager was asked about the sessional order being changed on Monday, and would we need a sessional order to be changed tomorrow. So he's not speaking about any of those topics on relevance. And you're letting him, but he's not speaking about things that are not to do with the questions.
The Leader of the House will need to make his answer directly relevant and provide the House with information about why he's talking about amendments, and I don't think he was asked about amendments, but I wanted him to explain to the House how he's being directly relevant, because the Manager is correct.
The dwindling numbers of the opposition has been consistent. The member for New England defied the shadow cabinet, then moved to the crossbench, knocking the opposition, who started at 42 this term, down to 41. The National Party defied a decision of the shadow cabinet and then moved to the crossbench, knocking the opposition from 42 members down to 28 yesterday. And today we had the first step from the reader of The Art of War and his 4 followers, making sure that they defied the decision of the shadow cabinet.
Order.
The number of people.
We're going to. All right. No. The manager. You'll get the call. You'll get the call. Order. Question. Order. Order. Members on my right. The manager is entitled to do that. He's done that. We're going to follow the standing orders. He's well within standing orders to. The manager, we're just going to deal with your point that you've raised. Or when the House comes to order, we'll deal with this in a sensible way. The manager's moved that the Speaker no longer be heard. I'll put the question. Those opinions say aye. Against no. I think the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. question is the member no longer be heard. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair and the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Bowman and Fadden as tellers for the ayes, and the honourable members for Werriwa and Bean as tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 32, noes 98. The matter was resolved in the negative. Just allow members to return to their seats quickly and quietly. In continuation, the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Speaker. And so the number of people on the non-government benches following the shadow cabinet position now is 23 that will follow the shadow cabinet and 33 that will not. That means for the Leader of the Opposition, who at the end of this week has to fill... Speaker. For the Leader of the Opposition, who at the end of this week has to fill 11 front bench vacancies, there are only 5 backbenchers left to fill these 11 vacancies who follow the shadow cabinet position. It's a group of 4 across there now on the crossbench: cross, very cross, apoplectic and just plain weird.
Prime Minister.
I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.